All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Melanie Carlson. I'm the city engineer, and with me I've got Scott Vaughn, our fire chief. Also in the room, Aaron Quaker, our city administrator, and then we do have one member of the task force with us. Maybe some others will come in here in a little bit later. The way tonight's going to work is Scott and I will give a presentation. We can take questions during the presentation, and then at the end, there's drawings and things over on those tables that you can look at when we're all done. So as I mentioned, we are here to talk about the proposed fire station to get you information about it prior to the referendum on March 1st. The proposed station is located on the 300 block of West Broadway where the DOT building used to be. So on 300 West Briggs, on Briggs between 3rd and 4th. And the reason that we have a referendum is anytime the city is borrowing or spending more than $700,000 on a general purpose building, we need to go to a vote of the citizens. So the spoiler alert on this is that although we're asking to borrow $5 million, the debt levy will not increase in order to do that borrow. And I'll explain that later on, but that's always everyone's first question. So we wanted to get that out here up front. So I'll cover that in a little bit, but until then I want Scott to provide some background information on the department and the existing building.
Thank you, Melanie. Thanks people for coming today. So our fire department was built and we went into it in 1972. I use the analogy, my first car was a 1973 Chevy Vega, and there's a reason I'm not driving it anymore. But anyways, we've got 21 members on our department. There's 4 of us that are full-time. There's 3 full-time drivers, and I'm also a full-time employee, but I do code enforcement. I help with planning and zoning. I do all the rental inspections, and then I am also the fire chief. So 4 of us full-time, and then there's 17 volunteers that have full-time jobs in town, and they have to be able to leave for any call we get during the day or night. Of those 21 that we have, currently we have 9 that are trained at the EMT level. So a few years ago, we were seeing that the response time of a previous EMS provider was down a little bit, and we wanted to see if we could get that response up a little bit. We had guys that were interested. We're centrally located in the city, and we started answering about 2.5 years ago all 911 calls, all the medical calls. We got there much quicker than the previous company, and we started that aid for people before they got there and continued it. And now with Care Ambulance, who's doing a good job, they're out south by the new DOT building. So for them to get to certain places in town, it's going to take them a little bit longer. So with our response, we're getting there and we're starting care for those people a little bit quicker. The vehicles that we have based out of the station we are currently in, there's 6 vehicles there. We have an 85-foot aerial truck. We have 2 engines. One's a city pumper, one's a country pumper. I'll go into the the difference of the pumpers here in just a second. We have a 3,000-gallon tanker truck. We have a rescue truck, which the guys take for the EMS calls. We have a brush truck, which goes to wildland fires and anything that's off the grid, and we have to get a 4x4 back to. We have a rescue boat that currently is not in our station. It's actually over at the DOT site that we've purchased because we don't have room in our station. The other side of our, in the back of our building is what used to be the Sally Port for the old jail. We have a side-by-side utility vehicle there that we also take for wildland fires. Out right now currently at the wastewater treatment plant, we have our education trailer, which is a 32-foot trailer. We started a program about 25 years ago called Adopt a Firefighter, where we go to all the second graders in our school district. We teach them throughout the school year the whole, the value of safety, fire safety and education, and then at the end of the year we bring them to the fire station. We have that trailer there. It is basically mirrored after your house. There's a living room, there's a kitchen, a bedroom. They have to see the dangers that are in the living room, kitchen area, then we put them in the bedroom. We put theatrical smoke in there. They have to make it out the window, go down, dial 911. So that's the education trailer. Then we have my vehicle, which we call the command vehicle, that I use for the different things that I do throughout the city. So how we are structured in our department. So when that 911 call comes in for a fire up at that top line, I told you we had two pumpers. One's a city pumper, one's a country pumper. The city pumper has all of our firefighting gear on it. So all the guys' coats, hats, and the bunker gear is on that truck. So what we do in the city for a city call is what's called the swarm method. The driver on duty goes straight to the scene, pages everyone to that area, and then everyone leaves and goes to that area, gets dressed right there, rather than everyone responding to the station and then getting the truck to off to the scene. We've seen that saves us time in our response when we have the emergencies. In the middle, outside the city, is our country pumpers utilized. We do respond to the station for all those calls, and we do get dressed at the station. And when we go outside the city, we take 6 people. We take 4 firefighters, we take a driver and an officer. Then behind that pumper, we take the tanker for country fire. That way we bring 3,000 extra gallons to the country because we don't have hydrants, obviously, out there. And in that tanker, we'll bring 2 more people. So you'll have a total of 8 going to the country fires, which still leaves us 12 to 13 people in town to respond to calls that we have in town. And we do have calls in town while we're out of town and vice versa. So, and then the bottom line there is what our EMS response is. So dispatch gives us the call. My driver at the duty gets in that rescue truck, takes off, and if it's during my normal working hours, which are 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, I will, when they get that call, report to the station. So they're taking a truck out, the station's unmanned for just a few minutes till I get there, and then I respond to calls after that until they get back. That way we keep that station covered for any calls that we might have. This next graph, you're going to see our response area, and obviously Fairfield covers the area in red in the middle there. Our area that we cover is about 130 square miles. And then everyone outside of that is Libertyville, Lockridge, Packwood, Batavia, Brighton, and Richland. When you add all those up, you're at about 460 square miles. And what we do and what they do for us is called mutual aid. We have automatic mutual aid, which we started about 3 years ago. So if there's a structure fire out in the county and it's a confirmed structure fire, if it's our district, we get paged immediately, and then whoever is closest on that map will automatically get paged with us. Before, we would get on scene and then we would request their help. Now we know we've got 2 departments going, we've got more resources going. It's the same way for JAWS calls. If we have a really bad accident, we know we're going to need more people, so we've got that automatic mutual aid going right away. If we get on scene, we don't need them. They buy trucks with reverse just like we do, and they can go home. So, but it's nice to have that extra help. You just know that you got that help coming. So the next thing, insurance ratings. ISO is the rating that we have in our department. When I started in 2011, we were at a rating of a 6, and we got reviewed in 2012, and with the upgrades we did in our water system throughout town, and then our dispatchers, at the time they only had like 1 dispatcher dispatching out of the law center. They've switched that to 2. Those are 2 of the main things that they look at in the insurance rating. The amount of water we can take to the country. When I first got on the department, we were taking 750 gallons in a pumper and 1,200 gallons in a tanker. So you were right at about 2,000 gallons. Now we're taking 4,000 gallons. Our country truck has 1,000. One thing you'll notice about fire trucks from 1972 to now, they're a lot bigger, much bigger. So we're taking 4,000 compared to 2,000, which obviously makes a big difference for the insurance people. They like that. And then the rest of it is your fire prevention throughout your city. I talked about our fire prevention program we do with the second graders, your building codes, community outreach, and then your safety courses that we do. In our training at the fire department, we have to stay up on our training. We have to keep good records of it for them. So in 2012, when we were rated, we went from a 6 to a 5. And then in 2017, we went from a 5 to a 4. So what we found when we went to a 4, they said if you can get, we were talking about a station even then, and they said, well, one thing they always ask us, where's your training tower? I said, we don't have a training tower. The closest one is in Ottumwa. We've had people say, well, Ottumwa, that's not that far. Just take your guys and go over there. Well, we can send a couple of guys at a time. We can't send our whole department there. And that's when we train, we have to train as a department. We have to train with the departments around us like Libertyville, Lockridge, because they're going to be the ones working with us. So we want to be able to train with everyone on site rather than just sending a couple of guys to Ottumwa or Burlington. So they said that the training tower would be very useful in getting that rating dropped from a 4 to a 3, along with getting some of our officers certified as trained officers as far as the Iowa Fire Service Training Bureau is concerned. So we've got a couple of those going through that right now. The existing fire station, why do we need this? Some of the deficiencies at the station right now, as you can see in those pictures, this guy up here, if anybody knows Brad Waugh, he's a pretty good sized guy. He's in between our country pumper and where we store our extra hose and stuff, and it's all he can do to squeeze in there. So that's what I'm talking about. The trucks are getting bigger. They're not getting any smaller. Down here is our tanker, which actually goes out the back of the station. This one goes out the front. This one is right behind it going out the back. This here is our workbench area. And anytime we have to do work there, we got to pull that tanker out. So it just very, very cramped in there. We'll go ahead to the next slide. And same area, it's down in the Bay Area. You can see here upstairs there is where our day room is and our kitchen area, TV. The guys can watch TV. And then down here at the bottom, you can see where the guys have their sleeping quarters. There's 3 beds in there. The thing that is very alarming about that is it's right off the Bay Area, and if you're going to have a fire, or if you're going to have a fire in the fire station, most of the times it happens in the Bay Area. Right now, if those guys are asleep and there's a fire in that Bay Area, there's nowhere for them to go. There's no way out but this door. There's no window in there. So obviously not a safe environment for the guys if that would happen. And then the one thing that we're finding is we're tracking more and more carcinogens back from the fires through the fire station. This whole area upstairs into the dorm area, it's just getting tracked everywhere. And that's where the new station will have what we call an airlock, which will separate all those areas from the Bay Area and keep those carcinogens in the Bay Area and get that air moved in up and out of the building.
Thank you, Scott. So the last thing on this, yes.
I have a question for Scott, actually. Did insurance costs change dramatically when you go from a 6 to a 4? Or?
So what?
I'm going to repeat that question. So the question was whether insurance costs changed dramatically when we went from the 6 to the 4.
When we went from the 6 to the 5, I was like, boy, that's pretty impressive. I'm really proud of that, happy about that. I went to the different insurance companies. I went to 3 of them in town, and I said, what will 1% do for some homeowners?
Point.
I'm sorry, 1 point. What will that do for their homeowners insurance? And they said it'll be a savings of between 3 to 5%. So you're looking at 9 to 15%, if we can get that, 3 points. So pretty significant.
Could you contact my insurance company, please?
I can.
The homeowners, so they know. I'd appreciate that.
Yep. Anything else before Melanie comes back on?
More of it later.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so the last thing on this slide is the storm shelter in the risk category 4. So one of the questions that we've gotten several times throughout this process is, A, why can't we just build a metal pole building? And what about remodeling the existing station? So the risk category 4 is a relatively new federal standard. As a direct result of the Joplin tornado, emergency response buildings are required to be at a higher structural capacity than other buildings. What happened with Joplin, the tornado hit, and the PD, the firemen, they couldn't respond because their vehicles were under the rubble. So this risk category 4 requires us to be at that higher level, whether it's a new or existing. And as far as the existing, we would have to put in a new roof, new walls, probably a new foundation. And if you are doing all of that while trying to maintain operation of the existing station, that new site looks better and better. So what has been done up to this point? So back in June of 2020, the city purchased the DOT site. And at the time, the city, although thought about it for the fire station, the council hadn't really started looking in depth regarding the fire station. They just saw it as a centrally located site that would be good for any city purpose. So with that then, the city hired Klingner and Associates to do a drive time analysis of 5 different sites. That was the old helipad site by the old hospital, near the law center, the existing site, the DOT site, and then the corner of 4th and Kirkwood. There's some parking lots there. And the architect looked at those sites, looked at the topography, looked at the utilities to see, is it big enough even for a proposed station? And that eliminated a few sites, but the biggest factor was the location. And what they found is, even though near the law center, it's a relatively flat site, there's plenty of room, it was going to make the response time to the east side of town much lower than what it is now, and was not serving the community equal as we are now. The other thing that's important is that railroad underpass on 2nd Street. Being close to that allows for the great response times north of the tracks. So we found out the drive time analysis and the analysis of each of the sites narrowed it down to the DOT site and the existing site. From there, the architect and their engineers did structural analysis on all 3 buildings, the 2 DOT buildings and the existing fire station. We also did asbestos testing on that, so if we would remodel or tear down, we knew what we were getting into in any of those buildings. But that structural analysis is what brought up the concerns regarding the full integrity. From there, then, they also did a site layout of what a proposed station would look like on either site. And that's where our task force really got involved. And our task force has been involved in this for since the drive time analysis was done. And they looked at those 2 options. Did it meet our needs? What exactly were the needs? And ultimately, the task force decided that the DOT site was the best option to provide not only meet existing needs, but to meet future needs. And the task force then worked with the architect to come up with the plans that we have for you now. So this is a rendering of the proposed station at the intersection of Briggs and 4th, so looking northeast. We've got the larger trucks coming out onto Briggs with the smaller trucks coming out on, the larger trucks are coming out onto 4th with the smaller trucks coming out onto Briggs. Then this is the east end, so you'd be at 3rd and Briggs looking northwest. And this is the office sides, the locker rooms, the more support rooms. And then this is the floor plan. We do have this available over on the tables for people to look at in detail. But the L shape that you have on the far left-hand side is important with the drive-through bays. That was a real, not just a want, but a need for the station. Our insurance company prefers it that way because the trucks are hard enough to drive in reverse as it is, let alone, I mean, as Scott mentioned, they do have reverse, but when you're coming back from a station, from a fire, people are tired, it's late at night, it's much easier to be able to pull forward into those bays rather than having to back into them like we do now. So that's where we have the L shape that allows us to maximize the number of pull-through bays on this site. Then right between the bays and the rest of the station, there's room for the firefighters to take off their gear, put them directly into washing machines there. And then there's airlocks or a vestibule that's going to separate the bay from the rest of the station. From there, you would go, the firefighters would go directly into a locker room. We do have a couple different configurations of the locker rooms and restrooms, so depending on the makeup of the force, you can have one female over here and still have room for the remainder of the fire department there. So that's why there's lots of doors. We've tried to provide for as much flexibility as possible because, as Scott mentioned, the existing station was built 50 years ago and it served the needs, but our needs are ever changing and we want to provide flexibility in that. Then as we continue on, these light blue spaces are the rec space or the day space, that room to eat in, to cook in, to exercise in. These dark rooms are our sleeping quarters. Right now we have one sleeping quarters for anyone, regardless of gender, would have to share. This provides separate sleeping quarters. It also provides, again, room for expansion as the city may change or grow. We may have more people overnight, and that we have space in there for additional sleeping quarters. Now, the separate sleeping quarters are important, not just for the gender side of things, but you may have a fireman that snores and is causing havoc on everyone else's sleeping havoc. And that brings me to a point I should have said earlier, is Klingner & Associates is our architect on this. They have been great to work with. Their primary architect that has worked with us is actually a volunteer firefighter. So he's the one, him and Scott will talk fireman stuff and stuff that I didn't ever even think of, like the fact that if you have one person snoring, that other fireman's not getting a good night's sleep. That's the sleeping quarters. Then where we go into is an EMA command center. So over the last year and a half, we've been in a public health emergency, and our emergency management coordinator has coordinated closely with public health. However, most natural disasters, or all natural disasters that we're going to see in Iowa, are going to be coordinated with the fire department. You have a tornado come through, the fire department's going to be working on that structural safety. We're actually in a seismic zone. If we would ever have an earthquake, you have the fire department that's going to be helping shut down the gas mains and things like that. So having an EMA command center in the fire station is good for future planning. We hope we never have to use it, but we have it in there. And what this community doesn't have is a storm-rated EMA command center. This, the bold dark line is the area that will be a storm shelter. So not only does the whole building have to be to that risk category 4, we have another central area that is the storm located area, or storm shelter area, that is rated to 250 miles per hour winds. So we have that EMA area in there, which the county does not currently have. It is so large, or this dashed area is large enough to cover anyone that is in the station, including if this classroom space is full. So Scott talked about the training that the fire department needs. Just to maintain our current level of certification, the department needs around 680 hours of continuing ed each year as a department as a whole. And they can do that in-house. And so we have the classroom space available for them to be able to do it. They can bring in other departments such as Lockridge or Libertyville to share on that training. Again, saving the community that effort of giving them their individual trainings. What we've also done here with this classroom space is we've separated it from the rest of the fire station so that if another organization wanted to use it, that it could be used without interrupting the operations of the fire department. There's bathrooms there. And then lastly, up there is the training tower. A training tower is essentially a 3-story stairwell. It's got stairs on the inside, stairs on the outside, doors, windows, and hatches. And then there is an open cavity in the middle of that stairwell. So it allows the department to practice various types of exercises, including even the rappelling, like for confined space, without actually having to go into confined space. So the training tower Scott mentioned is important for our ISO rating, but also just for our firefighters to be able to practice on these real life situations without entering the real life situation. At the beginning of the presentation, I discussed the debt levy and that this project will not increase the debt levy. What we have here is the city's long-term debt plan. The top of that line is, or the top of the graph is the debt capacity, and it's going up at 2%, assuming that the debt levy stays at the $3.02 and that valuations are going up at 2.5%. The gray, or the darkest color on there, is the existing debt. So right now, the last debt the city took out was for street improvements, primarily Industrial Park Road. But what we have in the next couple years is that debt starts to fall off. And the light, not the light blue, this blue is what would happen or how the debt for the fire station fits in there. So it's the debt for the fire station is backfilling the capacity, keeping that level, keeping the debt at $3.02 and using it to pay off the fire station over 20 years. Then the orange and the gray and the yellow and the pink are future debt, or is possible future debt. So what I love about this graph is that not only can we do the existing or the proposed fire station without increasing that debt levy, we still have room for projects down the road. We're not eating up all of our capacity for the next 20 years. And I will say I have my eye on redoing Burlington in about 7 years with this debt capacity. And there is room for that with this current, or with this proposed structure. What does it mean in terms of dollars and cents? So we're looking at a $6 million project with $5 million coming from the debt levy and $1 million coming from ARPA. We are working with Pathfinders to work on as many grants as possible, hopefully to get that number down, but at a minimum compensate for continued inflation. But we haven't been awarded any grants at this time, but we will be working on them after the election. Schedule-wise, so we have the referendum on March 1st. It is for city residents only because of the way the debt is being levied. It's being levied through city property taxes. So even though the department serves people outside of the city of Fairfield, it's being paid with city property taxes, which is why it's for city residents only. We'll be looking at, really regardless of the way the referendum passes, we'd be looking at demolishing the DOT buildings over the next year. If the referendum passes, we will have Klingner continue on final design. So we have the floor plan, but the details of construction have not happened yet. So we'll have them starting on that with a bid happening about a year from now. And we'd be looking at a 12-month to 18-month construction. So we'd be moving in around mid-2024.